but I'd like to ask you, if you have a cell phone, please put your cell phone on vibrate or silent. We're going to do that.
Or off.
This first forum is about SOAR and sustained VC. Afterwards, we're going to have a 10-minute break, and then we'll have the city council candidates at 7:45. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening. I'm David Marin with the League of Women Voters. Welcome to our forum on the land use issues in Ventura County, and this is a presentation by SOAR, Sustained VC, and representing a no position, our third panelist. At this time, I'd like to introduce the co-president of the League of Women Voters, Pat Essick.
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming this evening. We're really happy that you're here. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the League of Women Voters. It's an organization that was founded as women got the right to vote when the amendment was passed that gave women the right to vote. It was founded because the women had never had the opportunity to participate in government, and they needed to learn how. And the organization has been founded to encourage active participation in government and to help people become educated and able to be involved in government. And the kinds of things we're doing tonight are exactly the kinds of things that the League believes in. Being educated so that when you have a chance to vote, you can make a wise decision. We're very happy to see you all here. We're very happy to partner with the Ventura County Civic Alliance. And I'm happy to have these panelists that have agreed to come tonight and to educate us about their points of view. And I wish you well. Thank you. Forgot my most important duty. Would you all please stand for the flag salute? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think I failed to mention it, but the League of Women Voters does not support or oppose candidates, and it also does not support or oppose parties. So I just wanted to let you know about that.
Thank you, Pat. Our other co-host tonight is the Ventura County Civic Alliance. This is a nonprofit regional group that's focused on sustaining the quality of life in Ventura County. They produce the State of the Region report. There are some copies out there in the back as well for those who want to take a copy of that. At this time, I'd like to explain the format. So the candidates, because this is a very complicated issue in some way, we're giving them 5 minutes, and I said candidates, I'll make that mistake all night, I'm sure. But our panelists, we drew numbers earlier. Our first panelist will be Steve Bennett, representing SOAR. They'll have 5 minutes for the opening statements. After that, we'll be taking the questions from the audience. They'll have up to 1.5 minutes for those questions. If you saw that we handed out cards when you came in, you can just raise your hand. Our volunteers will pick up the cards. They'll come up here, we'll sort them, and then I'll ask as many as I can tonight. We'll try to have each panelist answer the questions. Now, we offered all sides the choice of 2 panelists, so Sustained VC has 2 panelists, but they split the time that would be allotted, so just so there's no confusion on that. With that, Roger, I'll ask you to go ahead and hit the blank on the other remote. We'll bring up the PowerPoint. A little harder, maybe. At the egg. Very technical stuff going on here. I don't want to, there we go. And Steve, I think you want to back up a slide. And with that, you have 5 minutes. We'll go ahead and begin with our first panelist, Steve Bennett.
Well, good evening. I want to thank David Marin, the League, Pat, for hosting another debate that's really been valuable for our community. You know, I've been speaking a lot about SOAR, and I ask this question oftentimes. I say, where can you find a place in Southern California where local officials, local elected officials, have stood up to the development pressure, have protected the farmland in their community, and stopped urban sprawl? And it simply doesn't exist in Southern California. And The reason for that is because the profits from urban sprawl are just too enormous, and the campaign contributions to local officials are just too generous. And that's why 20 years ago, the citizens of Ventura County decided that they were going to take that power away from local elected officials to have the final say on whether land should be rezoned for development or not. And 20 years later, I think we can say SOAR works, and it's worked well in Southern California. And having the right to vote on development has become a core value of the citizens of Ventura County. And it's so embedded as a core value that when the opponents of SOAR, many of the people that are supporting Measure F also opposed SOAR when we did it 20 years ago, when they did their poll last February, they found that they just simply couldn't beat SOAR in a straight yes or no vote. And so their strategy was to come up with a competing initiative and try to confuse the voters, weaken SOAR's protection, but not make it obvious to the voters that they were weakening SOAR's protection. And so what we end up with here is Measure F that has many loopholes in it. When I say loopholes, I mean opportunities where the Board of Supervisors, without a vote of the people, can rezone land for development. And those loopholes, when you look at them on the surface, look like, well, they may seem to be okay. But what you don't realize is that those loopholes have attracted big money to the Measure F campaign. A disproportionate amount of money from the people that have land inside those loopholes is flowing in. And when we wrote our ballot comments back last August, they were then released. Everybody could see them. And after we started pointing out these loopholes, you started to see the Measure F campaign become pretty desperate to try to hide the fact that these loopholes are there in Measure F. I have here a Measure F brochure that has been sent out. And I have up on the screen, I just took a couple of the pages out of this brochure. I'd just like to call your attention to the two bullet points that I circled, bullet point 4 and bullet point 6 there. And we have magnified those so that you can read bullet point 4. This is bullet point 4. Improve safety at urban public schools by permitting options for adjacent farmland to avoid conflicts while keeping the land in compatible county uses. Urban development such as housing tracts and retail centers would need a public vote. And I would offer to you that last sentence there is flat out false. It is not true. And it is printed right there in their brochure. We've made that clear over and over, and they continue to repeat that. This is bullet point 6 that we had circled. No urban development can occur under Measure F without a vote of the people, period. Sounds very clear, sounds very definitive, and it is equally not true. It's a false statement. Now, I would offer to you, I want to prove to you that it's a false statement, both of those. This is the actual language from one of Measure F's loopholes, and this is section 2.7i. And it says the Board of Supervisors, without a vote of the people, may redesignate agricultural designated parcels adjacent to existing primary or secondary public school sites. I want to point out that word site, that's going to come up later, that are also adjacent to a city sphere, an existing city urban growth boundary, city limit lines, to an alternate general plan land use designation to reduce conflicts between schools and agricultural uses. Now that is a standalone section. It doesn't refer to being limited by any other section of Measure F, and there is no limitation in there on what the Board of Supervisors, if you look at the last sentences there, what the Board of Supervisors can designate the land to, nor any limits on how large the land area that they could decide to use this loophole for. So section 2.7i has no limits on what can be approved, even though they say that that urban development can't be approved next to a school. Section 2.7.
I have to stop you there, Steve.
Oh,
Okay.
Thank
Timer's
you.
right there, but yes, that was 5 minutes.
Great.
So we're going to move on. And one thing I didn't mention, at the league forums, we do not allow applause or anything, so I appreciate that you held your applause. We'll give you a chance later on in the evening. I'll ask Suzanne to go ahead and close up this one and open up the other PowerPoint.
I need the, can I?
Go ahead and press escape. And then you can close this one completely. and open up Sustain VC. Anybody who has questions for tech support, I'm your man. Go ahead and press F5, Suzanne. And Steve, if you could pass the clicker, or looks like we took care of that. Okay, we are reset. And Suzanne, I think we're all set. Thank you. So how about a big hand for Suzanne? Suzanne, right down here. There's that gate. Okay, our next panelists are Rob Roy and Lynn Jensen from the Sustain VC group. You two have the 5 minutes. You can see the timer in front of you, and you have the clicker. So we'll go ahead and start.
Thank you. My name is Lynn Jensen, and I'm the Executive Director of Ventura County CoLab. We are a policy consultant to farmers who wrote Measure F. Measure F starts from a simple idea. If you want to stop sprawl and protect agricultural land and open space in Ventura County, then agriculture must be economically viable. Our measure was filed by 3 farmers, John Lamb, Patty Waters, and Phil McGrath. They're local farmers in Ventura County, and they are family farmers. Their families have farmed in Ventura County for a combined 400 years. Agriculture is facing unprecedented challenges. You know about the 5 years of drought, pest control, lack of adequate buffers, severe lack of labor, bureaucratic red tape, and international competition, and Rob is going to talk about those and the impacts of those to farmers. What we know, though, as in the Star reported, that there are 3 growers that have called it quits just in the last few months in the Oxnard Plain. And this is very devastating. Over 1,000 employees were laid off. So why did farmers write Measure F? Well, this is the reason. The first reason was to keep farms from becoming unfarmable, and that's what's happening here in Ventura County. You see the picture there. That's what happened in the Central Valley when farmland was fallowed. To maintain the public vote for urban development outside of curbs, we agree that this is a core value in Ventura County, and so we kept that public vote, regardless of what the SOAR politicians are going to tell you. We add goals and policies to the county general plan that supports farming. This is one of the key parts of our measure, and hopefully we'll get to talk about that more. We improve the safety of 5 public schools. There are 4 in Oxnard and 1 school site in Ventura. We allow some limited food processing, adding jobs and stimulating the economy, and we're very excited about that. And we also require an economic study to guide the renewal in 20 years, because 2050 is simply too long. Most importantly are these goals and policies with respect to water for farmers. Without strong water policies like those that already exist in other coastal counties, agricultural counties that are close to us, Ventura County ag land will become fallow and barren. And farmers are tired of SOAR politicians demonizing them on Facebook and letters and videos, calling them large landowners and developers. Farmers have to farm on large land. That's just the way it is. But they are stewards of over 300,000 acres of local farmland, and they just want to keep farming. But what's happening is that the exemptions in SOAR will allow for development. But the question is, who decides, the voters or politicians? There was a recent story in the Ventura County Star, SOAR contributor tied to development proposal. This is the development proposal. A single major donor gave SOAR $150,000 over time, and actually $110,000 just in the last few months, or the last few years, excuse me. The City of Fillmore records show that this donor's 300-acre parcel, which is shown on this map, of pristine open space, is inside the curb line of the City of Fillmore, and it's exempt from a public vote. Justification for this plan was a 33-lot gated community of McMansions on the hillside, and it was called Rancho Los Olivos. This is what we call crony politics. Our farmers simply want to keep farming, and Measure F is the solution, and I'm going to turn it over right now to Rob Roy, who is going to talk about farmers.
In all 1 minute and 22 seconds, I'm Rob Roy, President and General Counsel, Ventura County Ag Association. Came here in 1977, and I've been an ag labor attorney for almost 40 years, representing the interests of all the farmers in this county. I'm talking about production farmers, packing houses, labor contractors, truck drivers, et cetera. Just to sort of get through all of this, the bottom line is we have 3 choices here tonight. We have the extreme view of no protection of our agricultural farms at all on a no vote. On the other hand, we have the very extreme position of locking up our agricultural property in a ballot box. And then we have the middle approach, which is taking some of the best of the SOAR initiative, allowing the citizens to vote on some of these projects, and also, most importantly, keeping the viability of the local farming industry. That's really key, and I hope to answer a lot of questions tonight about how important it is for farmers to remain in farming and provide all these folks in the audience the free viewscape they have and the quality of lifestyle that many people in this room think is attributed to SOAR. Thank you.
Thank you. And Roger, I'll ask you to go ahead and do the blank on the other switch. Our next panelist, there's really three choices for voters. You can vote yes on F, yes on C, or you may choose to vote no on both of them. And representing that position of no on both is Jared Barton. 5 minutes.
And I apologize for my
1 second,
complete-
Jared. Okay, you ready? Here we go. 5 minutes.
And I apologize for my complete lack of slides. California's home prices and rents are higher than just about anywhere else. Building less housing than people demand drives high housing costs. Local policies acting as barriers to housing supply include land use restrictions that make developable land much more costly than it is inherently. Such restrictions are supply constraints. Basic economic theory predicts, and many empirical studies confirm, that housing markets in which supply cannot keep up with demand will see housing prices rise. Restricted supply leads to higher prices and less affordability. Local barriers to housing development allow a small number of individuals to capture the economic benefits of living in a community, thus limiting its diversity and mobility. The trade-offs inherent in land use regulation are well known and have been of concern to policymakers and academics for decades. Though the exact number of new housing units California needs to build is uncertain, the general magnitude is enormous. On top of the 100 to 140,000 housing units California is expected to build each year, the state probably would have to build as many as 100,000 additional units annually, almost exclusively in coastal communities like ours, to seriously mitigate its problems with housing affordability. Good evening. My name is Jared Barton, and I'm an assistant professor of economics at CSU Channel Islands in the Martin V. Smith School of Business and Economics. And I'd like to clarify something. That isn't the position of my employer, my department chair, or my wife, who would prefer that I was not here this evening. The reason I'm here by myself is no one else would sit with me. However, every word I just read to you is the consensus expert economic opinion in the United States of America, because they're not my words. I quoted those respectively from the California Legislative Analyst Office report in September 2015, from Jason Furman, the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors to this guy you might have heard of, Barack Hussein Obama, and from a White House report that came out yesterday on how to build affordable housing. Let me make this perfectly clear. The economic consensus on land use restrictions is that land use restrictions serve to reduce economic mobility and reduce housing affordability. Now, I know, because I have read the VC Star this weekend, for the last 25 years of issues that have talked about SOAR, that you have been warned about this repeatedly in reports, and repeatedly someone from SOAR has told you that that is not true. And I am here to tell you that they are wrong. It is true. And in fact, an economist who is way better than me has demonstrated that in his PhD dissertation, and not for any county, not for General County, for our county right here. I know that what I am saying is grossly unpopular, and I don't care, because it happens to be true. And the job of politicians is to find what's popular and make it law. But the job of economists is to find what's right and make it popular. So I'm here to tell you what you are doing is choking off housing affordability. You're choking off economic development. You're making life harder on farmers who are no longer economically viable, or who would be a little bit more economically viable if they could just slough off a little bit of land here and there. That's what you're doing. So it's okay. I know what's going to happen. I too can read a poll. I used to work in Washington, D.C. But I want to make it perfectly clear that when you go home, when you look yourself in the mirror, what you are doing is to make it harder for poor people in your community and people who would be your neighbors if only you would vote otherwise, to live in Ventura County, the most beautiful place on earth. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and give them all a round of applause. Burn off some energy. Meanwhile, I'm showing off my technical skills here. Okay, we now, Roger, you're all set. Very good. We're going to start on the questions. Lynn, Rob, we'll start with you at Sustain VC. Besides allowing voters to decide on zoning changes in open space and agriculture, what else do these measures do? What else does your measure do? You have 1 minute, 30
I think
seconds.
from our perspective, from the farming community perspective, we have a number of provisions in the bill that would encourage the viability of farming, which is one of the biggest issues that I'm dealing with right now. I am dealing every day with lack of water, lack of available labor, pesticide elimination. We have regulations that are beyond the pale from both the federal and state government. It's virtually almost impossible for us to deal with these issues day to day. And so an initiative that would recognize the viability of the farming industry, I think, is the underlying premise of SOAR. If you believe that SOAR is really all about saving open space in agriculture, which I don't think it ever was, it's a slow growth measure. But even assuming arguendo that it was, then the underlying premise is that you have to have a viable agricultural community that is going to continue keeping these beautiful lands in agriculture.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to point out the most important goal that's in our initiative is about water. Without water, you will not see this farmland be irrigated, and you will not see production agriculture in this county. And when we worked with the SOAR organization on this in the beginning, they really refused to put that particular piece of it, which was talking about infrastructure, water infrastructure for agriculture, into their measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared, do you want to try and talk about anything in the measures that maybe voters don't realize?
No, I think that Steve has done a good job highlighting pieces, even though I'm not sure he's correct on them. He has highlighted the pieces that I think people might find most objectionable.
All right, and Steve, we'll go to you. I'll read the question again. Besides allowing voters to decide on zoning changes in open space and agriculture, what else does your measure do?
Well, when you say my measure, I think we have to say that in contrast with Measure F. Certainly, SOAR's Measure C ensures and continues people's right to vote before any major open space and ag land conversion takes place. And that simply is not what happens with Measure F. And Measure F has what I was referring to there as those loopholes in there. And those loopholes are vaguely written enough that with all of the profits that will come from urban development, you'll have high-priced lawyers that will find lots of ways to stretch those loopholes. Now, that's something that is the core fundamental difference between Measure C and Measure F. Every time that we found a good reason to be able to say, hey, we need to have an exception here for that, for the Board of Supervisors to be able to rezone land, we carefully structured that so that there were limits, so that it couldn't be abused. In every instance where Measure F created those kinds of loopholes, they did just the opposite. They did not put limits in, just as you saw with their 2 bullet points in the school loophole. They didn't limit what it could be rezoned to. They didn't limit how large it could be. And that is the fundamental difference, is you're certain about your right to vote, and you're not with Measure F.
Thank you. Jared, we'll start with you on the next question. For all of the panelists, there's quite a few here regarding the loss of farmland. Jared, there's been 3 major farming operations have closed in the last few months. What factors contributed to these closures? And if, in your opinion, if SOAR is supposed to save farmland, why are we losing so much of it?
So first, I apologize. I'm an economist, but I do not carefully review the businesses that open and close in the county, and so I won't speculate as to what happened with them. But the fundamental changes that we are facing here is that this land has lots of economic uses, and its highest valued use is probably not agriculture. And the reason that you know that is that you all had to pass a law to keep it in agriculture. If that law weren't there, I think that we are all acutely aware that tomorrow it would be turned into other things. That is evidence that that is not the most economically viable use of that land. Now, I have no doubt there are some farmers who are still making money hand over fist, and more power to you. I simply believe that people who are currently holders of real estate, and it is no longer the highest valued use of that real estate, should be able to sell it to other people or use it themselves in ways that are more profitable. Period. End of story. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, the same question to you about SOAR. There's been 3 major farming operations that have closed in the last few months. What factor contributed to these closures? And if SOAR saves farmland, why are we losing so much of it?
Agriculture constantly has, over decades, over the last couple centuries in the United States, you're always going to see change in agriculture. There is a concerted effort to try to make it look like agriculture is in this unique stressed situation. And yet the same thing was alleged about SOAR when SOAR passed 20 years ago, that SOAR was going to ruin agriculture. And yet, if you look at all of the statistics put out by the Agricultural Commissioner, the Farm Bureau, et cetera, agriculture's production is at record levels 20 years after SOAR passed. Agriculture land values are at record levels. But there is a concerted effort, just like there is a concerted effort to mislead you about the loopholes in Measure F, there is a concerted effort to try to trump this up. In fact, in the Pacific Coast Business Times, they talk about that large farm that closed. They actually write in there that it was because the man was retiring, and another ag operation took over that farmland right after that. Those workers are out there working in other operations. You're not seeing all of that happening when you have record crop production and record land values. But that's not what Measure F wants to emphasize. They want to emphasize that they really don't have any loopholes in Measure F, and agriculture's really in trouble.
Thank you. We'll stop you there. And to the Sustain VC group, so same question to you. Do you want me to reread it?
No, I understand the question. If you believe that, you can buy a lot of desert land, folks, because they've been spewing that for years. Obviously, Mr. Bennett hasn't worked in the private sector. He doesn't know the difference between gross sales and your net within a company. For years and years, all we've heard from the SOAR people is scare tactics, how wonderful they have created this county, and the reality is it's all about the growers. Why did these growers go out of business? They were all 3 of my clients, folks. I have personal knowledge of what happened to these particular people. And I will tell you that the Hiji people that had union contracts for over 40 years in this county, with workers being paid $31 an hour average for piece rate production, went out of business for one primary reason, because it wasn't economical anymore in this state. And we don't get any help from the SOAR folks. They haven't contributed in any way. And in fact, this SOAR initiative in 1998 was nothing more than the bootstrap for them to get to elected positions. Linda Park sitting there, Mr. Bennett have 20-year careers and retirement funds and have living here, and they're the ones who make all these decisions. They're the ones that make these decisions as to whether or not farmers get the water, or the farmers get the pesticide issues, or they get land use designations. So let's not miss the forest for the trees, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, we'll start with you. And this one talks about the timeline. So with the timeline spanning 2 generations, what specific tools and support mechanisms does Measure C provide to sustain the long-term viability of Ventura County agriculture? And along those lines, similar question as far as why the 34-year timeline in Measure C?
Great, I appreciate the question. Many people raise this issue, and you hear this mantra all the time. It says, hey, things are going to change between now and 2050. How could you possibly lock an initiative in between now and 2050? What SOAR does is it locks in the concept that when we make changes in Ventura County, we're going to follow the core value that we have here in Ventura County, which is we're going to check with the people before we make any major changes to open space and ag land in Ventura County. That's all it really does. So I would offer to you, that's the length of time question. In Napa County, when their SOAR initiative expired, their farmers up in Napa County supported and pushed through a 50-year extension of their SOAR initiative, and in 2008 it passed with over 60% of the vote. So you're not locking in Ventura County, you're locking in people's right to vote. But the second half of the question is, what are we doing for farming? I would offer to you that the same argument was made 20 years ago, and we responded and said the number one threat to any farm is if the farm next to it develops, because that's the real problem for farming, is they get surrounded by that urban development. And what SOAR does is ensure you don't have that piecemeal development. What Measure F does with its loopholes, it allows that piecemeal development, and that's the risk to farming.
To sustain VC, people?
I'm very happy to answer that question. I've been waiting for it for a long time. Mr. Bennett seems to think that there's an analogous situation between Napa Valley and Ventura County. Anybody here ever been to Napa County? The entire ag production area up there is grape vineyards. All the workers, all the companies, all the businesses, all the processing facilities, all the tourism is predicated upon preserving the agricultural nature of that community. They stole that initiative, brought it down here, put Ventura County on it after it had gone through the Supreme Court, and called it their own. The problem is that Ventura County has ag-urban interface problems that you don't have in Napa County, okay? And they've been fighting that for years. And the farmers keep dealing with this all the time. We deal with people all the time that don't understand late-night activities and irrigation and pesticides and lighting at nighttime and noises. It's a constant struggle with these folks. And that's only the production side. That's not the international competition and the lack of water and lack of pesticides and everything else. Making an analogy between Napa Valley and Ventura County for purposes of SOAR and saying that 60% of the people up there supported it until 2050, yeah, of course.
Thank you. Jared, would you like to weigh in about the issue of timeline and sustaining agricultural viability?
Sure, it's related. I understand what Steve is saying there about the vote. I get that. But you all have an opportunity. You could preserve this for 100 years. You could preserve it for 1,000 years if you want. You could buy an easement on all the farmland. And in fact, you had the opportunity to do that in 2004. You had a vote about starting an actual organization that would charge a quarter-cent tax on transactions and take that money and actually buy easements. And you could do that. You could do things like tradable development permits, where you let them develop some chunk of land somewhere for buying 5 times as much land somewhere else in the county. You didn't do that either. In other words, what you really like is you like voting to make other people continue to keep land the way you want without personally having to pay for it. And I'm sorry, when my kid takes other people's stuff without permission, I punish him. I'm sorry I can't do the same to you, but, you know, I'm not your dad. So that's what I think of it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to start with Sustain VC on this next question. Let's talk about water. I've heard a proponent of Sustain VC, Measure F, say it would help save water, especially important now because of the drought. Of course, this person goes on to say they see fields being watered with overspray into the road. It's done in the middle of the day. And these other questions, to get to the heart of the question to you, is how does Measure F truly save water? What would be the role for the Board of Supervisors?
Thank you. I'm going to take this one. I think it's really important if the Board of Supervisors and the county and the people who live here really want to have agriculture here, even in 20 years, they need to understand that we have to have water for farmers. And so our Measure F has really a goal for water and a policy for water. One of them is to try to get the county together to work on water infrastructure. There's many projects out there, they're very important, and we want that present in our general plan. And the second part is to maintain water resources for agriculture. And that is just a key goal, that if this county and the Board of Supervisors doesn't have in their general plan, then there's really no policy direction for this board from that perspective. And that is the most important part, really, of the Measure F, of the Measure F ballot measure. And we care very much about farming, and the only way we're going to keep it here is through really good policies. Now, it starts at the general plan level, that's where we're putting it in, but it needs to trickle down into the zoning ordinances and all the other planning documents in the county to make sure that we do have water infrastructure projects that use recycled water, that use brackish water kinds of facilities as well in this county to promote farming for the next 20 years. And if it doesn't happen at the Board of Supervisors level, then you're going to see more land be fallowed, just like the Central Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared, same question to you about water, but I'll allow you to add to that if you want to speak about government subsidies for water to local farmers. So the original question was about how would Measure F help save water, and the role of the Board of Supervisors. You could add that from the...
You know, I'm quite all right. I'll go ahead and let Steve talk about that. Thank you.
Always love it when a panelist gives me more time. So, Steve, we'll go to you with the same question about sustained VCs supposed to save water. What would be the role of SOAR with water, and what's your view on the Measure F?
I think the steady theme you hear, and this is another classic example, Measure F doesn't give any authority to the Board of Supervisors on the issue of water that Measure C does not give. But it is one of those soundbite issues that really sounds good and is being put out there. And this is part of what I would call a campaign of misinformation, literally trying to deceive people about the differences between Measure F and Measure C. Again, I want to emphasize, I've talked to attorney after attorney. There's not anything the Board of Supervisors can do under Measure F that they won't be able to do under Measure C. But what we will have with Measure C is we will have a commitment that if there is something that is really important that causes major rezoning of open space and ag, the citizens will be involved in that. You know, Rob has just mentioned that I don't have a lot of private sector experience, but I'll tell you one thing I do know. I know the difference between an honest campaign and people that fight fair and people that don't. And when you listen to the allegations when Rob says we stole it from Napa County, when you listen to those kinds of things, you are really seeing the beginnings of that campaign that's going to be very intense here for the next 6 weeks. Thank you.
Actually, David?
Sorry, Jared, you gave up your time.
Very good.
All right, but I will let you start with the next question, and you could use some of that time if you wanted.
Thank you.
So the question is, and this will be for all panelists, it's about housing, because obviously we're protecting agriculture. The question is about housing. So how many houses would we need to be, or would need to be built in Ventura County to significantly bring down the cost of housing? And given Prop 13, doesn't it make it hard to build middle-class housing that actually doesn't cost the government more in services than it brings in with taxes?
So this is actually a really good question, and it's really hard to do for a separate issue, which has nothing to do with SOAR. So this is not SOAR's fault, but in addition to the popularity of SOAR, we also have the popularity of single-family homes. It's probably the most popular zoning thing for most voters. Fundamentally, you have to change that too. You have to allow developers, when they recognize that it is profitable, which is to say that there are a bunch of humans that would like to join you here, to develop something other than single-family housing, which no one is particularly fond of once they're already here. It's kind of a miracle like that. I don't really know what it could possibly have to do with. I want to back up for a second. I apologize, and Steve, this wasn't directed to you in any way, but it came into my head while you were talking. Water is a separate issue from land, even though they are tied up. If you really wanted to deal with water availability in both California and in Ventura County, you would price water in markets, which is to say it would get more expensive when it's more scarce. And that's deeply unpopular. And really, I'm on a roll tonight for deeply unpopular. So let me put in a plug for pricing markets. I'm sorry, I won't price markets with water. We'll price water with markets. Fundamentally, and the housing affordability, the Legislative Analyst Office report actually talks about this, and the graph is tiny. So if you're interested, I will show you at the end, but it's hard to read, so I won't get into it right now because I'm out of time.
Thank you. Steve, same question to you about housing and how many houses would need to be built. If you want to expand that to talk about Measure C and the issue about housing affordability in Ventura County.
Thank you. We have, and one of the few places where there is similarity between CNF, we have written in there that when we must rezone land to meet state requirements in terms of affordable housing, Measure C allows that exemption. But if you ask the overall question, how many people want to move to coastal Southern California, and how much housing would you have to build to lower the price? All you have to do is look at Orange County, which at one time used to have the same population as Ventura County, and now is much larger than Ventura County. They've lost all of their agricultural land, nearly all of their open space, and what they have is higher housing prices than Ventura County. So it's not an issue of whether you're going to lose your farmland and open space. It's when are you going to get creative and actually build affordable housing rather than housing that makes more money for the developer but doesn't leave our community with the affordable housing stock that we really need. So this is an allegation that's constantly made about SOAR and actually should be made about anybody that's asking for people to have a right to vote. And it's one that the citizens of Ventura County have clearly weighed in and addressed, and that is they want to be convinced that it's a good project. Thank you.
Thank you. To sustain VC, your point of view as far as number of houses that should be built to lower the price, and what can we do about having more affordable housing?
I'll take that. As I said at the outset, we took many of the provisions of Measure C and adopted them as part of our Measure F. We just made it better. The fact of the matter is that he doesn't address the issue of farm labor housing. It's kind of a testy issue in the county, but I can tell you from the agricultural standpoint, and I dealt with federal officials from the Department of Justice about this issue in a lawsuit we filed against them in February this year, that the H-2A, the guest worker program that is coming into the United States, there's a paradigm shift to California and to the West Coast. The issue of farm labor housing is going to be a much more significant issue, and yet they don't address it, but we do. We do because it's a viability issue for the farming industry to stay alive. We do not have enough labor in this county, apart from water and other issues that are making agricultural employers, farmers, competitive. And this housing component is an important element of Measure F.
Anything to add, Lynn?
I just want to say that the SOAR ordinance expresses a preference to keep farm worker housing in the city, and that preference is 3 times as expensive to build it in the city as in the county. And ours really doesn't express that preference. We want it all of the above. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe, Steve, you're up first on this next one. We're going to talk about food processing. How does acreage from Measure C and F each set aside for farmers to use for so-called food processing of their crops? What restrictions do each impose, if any, for such activity?
Classic example of the difference between Measure C and F is in the food hub reference that we have in there. There are about 200 acres have been analyzed as the possible food production capacity here in Ventura County. And this is by some experts that came in from Sacramento. We spoke with those people quite a bit as we were writing the SOAR initiative. And what those experts identified was, although there's 200 acres of food processing that could take place, most of that food processing is already allowed in the agricultural areas. And there's just a few things that you can't do in the agricultural areas, like cooking cooking and bottling. And we spoke with those experts, and they were very comfortable when we said, you know, if you're at about 12 acres, that would be the amount of the 200 acres that needs to have special zoning to be able to allow 200 acres of food processing. You only need to have about 12 acres for cooking, bottling, et cetera. Now, by doing that, that's a classic example of us trying to be cautious and limit how much agricultural land are you allowing the politicians to rezone without checking in with the people. Meanwhile, Measure C went just the opposite. They said, let the Board of Supervisors do a whole 225, don't check with the people at all, and who knows what you'll get with that. Thank you.
Thank you. To sustain VC, how much acreage does CNF each set aside for farmers to use for food processing? What restrictions do you impose, if any?
So we allow 225 acres for processing. This is very important to the farmers. And what Supervisor Bennett said is really not true. The zoning ordinance does not allow any additives to be added that would make it processing, and it would not be allowed in agricultural lands. And that precludes lemonade and guacamole, and that's where we want to go in this county. We'd like to have our own private labels for Ventura County for lemonade and guacamole. The other thing they didn't consult is their own food hub group that's here, which includes Phil McGrath, who is one of our proponents. He is one of the major leaders in the food hub group. They didn't talk to him before they put their 3-acre parcels. In processing, you couldn't even park trucks on a 3-acre parcel, so there won't be any processing, any additional processing under SOAR. Actually, our study, our initiative, took into account Bruce Stensley with the Economic Development Cooperative, and their numbers were 223 acres, which would produce $1.3 billion total expansion of the Ventura County economy and create 2,640 jobs. And that's what we're looking for, is jobs in this community. And it's very important. Consumers these days want ready-to-eat produce that is cut, washed, juiced, blended, mixed, and fermented, and they would like to have it locally. And right now, all of our produce is being trucked out of the county. There's tons of trucks, you see them all the time, for processing in Salinas and the Central Valley. And we'd like to keep those trucks here, and we'd like to be able to process our own produce here. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared, do you want to add anything?
Well, first, I would also like some lemonade and guacamole, but on a more restricted time frame than Measure F is talking about. I'm a little peckish. And secondly, I take a fairly laissez-faire attitude to this. Either it is economically efficient for farmers to convert some of their land into processing facilities, which will raise the value of the other land in agriculture and also raise their profits, or it is not. And that will either have spillover effects on the community, which will be ameliorated depending on who has the property rights and who has to pay whom, or they won't. But going back for a second to something that Mr. Bennett said, he was saying that we need to move away from the developers' profitable housing of these large single-family McMansions and towards affordable housing. Remember, it's far more profitable to build yourself an 8 or 10-story building and sell off 25 or 30 condos than it is to build a couple houses on the same land. The reason they don't do that is because there are additional restrictions other than SOAR that keep that from happening. Just removing those and keeping SOAR would still be really great. It would be a good thing. Removing SOAR and keeping those would also be great to me. I think that for many of you, the first option would be really nice. I just don't think you're going to adopt it, which is why I'm here tonight to say no to everything. Thank you.
We only have time for about 2 more questions, but there's a lot here, and I apologize in advance. I'm not going to be able to get all the questions in, but I'll try to get some of the controversial ones in. To the Sustain VC people, it says that Measure F allows development near schools without a vote of the people. And it also says, why does Measure F's brochure say no urban development can occur without a vote of the people when it does seem to allow development? So this has been talked about before. I'll give you a chance to answer this question about development near schools and without a vote.
Thank you. I want to be very clear about this. The exemptions for urban development around schools, those parcels, are actually provided in the Oxnard and Ventura city SOAR measures. The Oxnard city SOAR measure allows 160 acres a year to be added to the curb if the land is deemed unusable for agriculture. And that's what Measure F is all about. Let's not have our farmland be unusable for agriculture. If it gets there, then Measure F has a provision to allow that land to be in a rural county use, because you can't develop urban land in the county next to a city. Based on the guidelines for orderly development, it hasn't been done here for 30 years, and it's not going to happen here. What would happen is that the farmer that's next to a school would go to the city and have it annexed into the city to get the city services that it would need, the water and sewer, and they do it through the loopholes, which are actually in the Oxnard and Ventura, and actually 6 city SOARs, including Santa Paula, Fillmore, Camarillo, and Moore Park. And so that's the way this is. And so what we want to do is create a rural buffer, some kind of a use in between the high density and the schools and the farmland, so that that next piece of farmland is buffered, not developed into shopping malls and housing tracts. Thank you.
Jared, anything to add on this one?
Yes, actually, and I hate to disagree with any of my fellow panelists, but right, they're really nice people and all, but that will create something similar to what's happened in London, where they created a green zone immediately around London, combined with the existing restrictions on zoning in London, has made London the most expensive city in Europe, if not in the whole world. The bottom line is the land just outside of the urban growth boundary, on the other side of the line, according to an economist at CLU, has been reduced in value by about $400,000 relative to land just inside. Let me put that differently. The artificial scarcity created inside the city has dramatically driven up the costs inside the city. The only reason that land just outside the city isn't being used more efficiently is because of measures like SOAR, and mostly as the way Sustained VC would keep it. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, same question to you about Measure F, about
Thank
development.
you. I appreciate the question. What Lynn Jensen just said to you, I believe, is a part of the Measure F attempt to intentionally deceive people about one of the loopholes. And it's because they know that if people know the truth about that loophole that's being referred to, the school loophole, they'll realize that Measure F is not what it is purported to be. You saw the language. There was no language in there in that section that said they had to redesignate to rural land. It didn't say that at all. They could have said that. They should have said that if that's what they were going to do, but that's not what it said. And yet that's what she continues to say, even though it's been pointed out over and over again. Now, I would call that intentional deception, but they have enough money, because there is so much money that's going to be made on just that one loophole. They have enough money to be able to confuse the voters of Ventura County, and they may get away with it. The second thing is, she said, oh, it should be the cities, and that kind of gets everybody all confused again. The cities should be doing this. I asked this question. If they wanted the cities to be the ones doing this exception, why did they write in the opportunity for the Board of Supervisors to do it? If they want the cities to do it, let the Oxnard SOAR do that if that's in fact what it says. But they didn't. They wrote it in because they knew it was a loophole that would be very attractive. Follow the money, and you'll see that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start this next question with Jared, and it's really about profiting from converting land to development. You've talked about that. The questions are about if the people funding Measure F are the ones who would actually be profiting from conversion of that. So, Jared, I guess for you as an economist, do you want to talk about converting farmland to development?
Oh, could you turn that into a question for me, David? I heard a lot of statements, but at no point did I hear anything where I would have told the interrogative was appropriate to a student writing that to me.
So I'll be getting an F in your class, I guess? Okay.
Mr. Marin.
Jared, as far as the way that the farmland gets converted to development, is that an appropriate thing for Ventura County, and having the people who would convert and make money from that give up the agriculture?
So if what we're asking, David, I'm going to try to rephrase the question too. If what we're asking is, are there people who would make a big pile of money if they were allowed to turn their farmland into something other than farmland? The answer is obviously. Let me emphasize this. The farmland is worth dramatically more as not farmland than it is as farmland, okay? This is just a fact. Now, here's the thing. That market value does not incorporate the non-pecuniary benefits that fall on other people, and it also doesn't include the pecuniary benefits that fall on other people. It's totally true. Only here's the thing. You didn't try to buy that land from them. You took the land from them by voting. Okay? That's what happened. So, yeah, a lot of people would make money. Here's the other people who would make money as the density of the county would rise. Everybody. I know we love to villainize Orange County around here. Let me make this clear. Orange County isn't just 3 million people. It's also dramatically wealthier than Ventura County on a per capita basis. And that's because agglomerations of people are more productive. Period. End of story. Okay? So yeah, there would be people who make money. The last time I checked in the United States, that was still okay. Perhaps I am mistaken. If I am, please don't tell me because I think I might die. My entire discipline is kind of predicated on the idea that making money is okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So Steve, I'll try to put this for Measure C. Measure C does restrict development. It restricts converting land to development, and it also restricts that for several generations. Why is that appropriate?
Well, I was prepared to answer the question that you just asked about
Okay, if you
the
can
cost.
remember
So
what I asked,
they're
Chair.
both.
Wait, Steve, you knew it was a question?
They're both together. 100 acres, and this is a study that just came out 2 weeks ago. 100 acres of farmland in Ventura County rezoned for development will go up in value by $25 million. That's just 100 acres. Imagine a situation where somebody owns 1,000 and 10,000 acres, et cetera. That is going to create an enormous amount of pressure for development. And that's why when you write a measure like this that is so important to the citizens of Ventura County, you want to be really careful and put limits on the loopholes, because that kind of money will drive enormous amounts of money to go into boards of supervisors races. That kind of money will hire high-priced lawyers that will work every loophole they possibly can. And that is why I would offer to you Measure F at every opportunity. Explicitly avoided the opportunity to bring clarity to their loophole, to put limits on their loophole. They could so easily, with the school loophole, have said this is for only X distance from the school. They could have so easily done that, or it's only could be for rural. They put none of that in there intentionally. Thank you.
To the sustained VC?
I think I'm in medieval England, and he's arguing on behalf of the proletariat against people who own land. I almost feel as though Mr. Bennett hates people with land. There's this obfuscation within their campaign that anybody that has land and is a farmer is a developer in farmers' clothing. And I think that misses the entire argument here, is that farmers want to remain in farming. This county has had the guidelines for early development in place since the 1980s. It had the most restrictive land use policies in place anywhere in Southern California. The reason why there has been no development in this county had nothing to do with SOAR. It has everything to do with our economy. People weren't growing houses. So the point here is that let's just look at the bigger picture here for the farmers, okay? Let's understand that farmers want to stay in farming. It's not about development. That is a scare tactic by the SOAR folks that got them all elected in 1998. And it's not representative of what this industry is going to be in 20 years or 34 years from now. We have to get land use policies in effect that are consistent with general planned amendments of 20 years, and then reevaluate where we are as a county.
Thank you. I guess we should have planned this to go 2 hours instead of 1 hour. Unfortunately, this is our time. We'll have to stop here. I do thank all of the panelists for being here. We're now going to begin our closing statements. We'll reverse the order. And panelists, you have 1.5 minutes for your closing statements. We'll begin with Jared Barton.
I'd like to thank you all for your time and laughter. It's very encouraging. I want to point out something that Steve just said a moment ago. He said that if we rezoned 100 acres of farmland, it would be worth $25 million. Let me translate that to you. That farmland is more valuable as not farmland than as farmland. That is a giant price signal in my line of work. What that means is that there are people out in the world who would be happy to live here who cannot live here because you will not build the housing or you will not let other people build the housing to let them come. What you are doing is driving up the price of housing for the poorest people in your community and preventing people who would be perfectly happy to be your neighbors from being your neighbors. What I'm wondering is, I know Steve moved here in 1972, 73 after he got out of Brown. I moved here in 2012. There were about 375,000 people who lived here back then. There's about 850,000 now. I imagine, right, based on comments that I've read in the VC Star over the last 20 years, that you pointed out, we would have adopted these things earlier in other places. I'm just wondering, am I not supposed to be here? And if I'm not, who else isn't? That's what I want to know. Because that's essentially what you're saying when you vote for SOAR, or to a lesser extent, but still, for Sustain VC. Thank you very much. God bless and have a good evening.
Hold the applause, please. And we'll
No,
now go
please
to
don't.
Sustain VC. Minute and a half.
I would just like everyone to come away tonight thinking that Sustain VC, Measure F, is created by farmers. It's all about farmers. They have one of my clients that paid him $150. They have another farmer that's a developer. They don't have anybody on their board of directors that's a farmer, and anyone that was used to be a farmer that supported them in 1998 is no longer associated with them. We're all about farming. We're not developers in farming clothing, folks. We want to stay here. I've been in this industry for 40 years because I love this industry. I want to see it happen. I moved here in 1977. I love this county. I love the viewscape. But the viewscape comes at a cost, okay? Because those farmers out there are getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock every morning, and they're fighting international competition, and they're fighting to keep pesticides that they need for their crops, and they need water, and they need labor, and we don't need a board of supervisors or restrictive land use mechanisms that don't make it viable to continue on. Because ultimately, if those farmers go out of business, I will tell you that that land will be developed, even under developed. If that land goes fallow for 2 years, they can petition the Board of Supervisors under SOAR and get it rezoned. And in the meantime, what does that farmer and his family do? Watching the weeds grow in their field. Are they going to pay for their family?
Thank you,
No.
Rob. We'll have to
Thank
stop
you.
there. And we'll wrap up with Steve Bennett.
Well, thank you very much for your attention tonight. The fundamental question is, whose information do you trust? You've heard repeatedly from the Measure F people, farmers just want to stay in farming. I would offer to you that farming was very profitable in Orange County. And you had a lot of people say farmers wanted to stay in farming. But those profitable farmers sold out because it was more profitable to develop that land. The same thing will happen here in Ventura County if you let politicians, not citizens, have the final say. And so that leads you to the next question. Who do you trust? Does Measure F really have this protection built in it, just like SOAR? We vehemently say to you, no, it does not. The loopholes in Measure F are intentionally written in there in such a way to allow this piecemeal urban sprawl that has caused all of these problems in the rest of Southern California. I appreciate that farmers I appreciate those farmers that really want to stay in farming. What I don't appreciate are people that don't want to run honest campaigns. And this is not an honest campaign that is being run when you see a brochure like this. And certainly when you see a brochure that flat out says two things that are flat out not true, you're going to see a lot more of that. I hope the voters will follow the money and see through this. Thank you.
Thank you. How about a round of applause for all three candidates, please, or all panelists? And please stay seated. We have a couple of Couple of quick announcements for everybody. Please stay seated, panelists. As I mentioned, we'll have a city council forum that'll start in about 10 minutes. We'll have that. But you can't put on a forum like this without volunteers from the League of Women Voters. I'd like to recognize Pat Butler and Carol Lindberg, Helen Lamont, Pat and Roger Essick up here. We had our sorters, Pam Peckrich and Suzanne Harvey. We also were joined by AAUW tonight. We had 2 volunteers there in the back. Thank you, ladies, for that. And I'd like to say that this is an important issue. Your sample ballot, I believe, has the actual language and ballot arguments, so that's a resource to you to try and figure out what you want to do. Thank you to everybody. We'll be right back. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to, I'm sorry, ready, Bob?
By the Ventura County Star, by Supervisor Kathy Long, and by several other respected local officials who know me and know the work that I can do. I look forward to talking about the issues tonight. Thank you.
Our next candidate is Kevin Kildee. Kevin, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I want to thank the League of Women's Voters for holding this. I'm Kevin Kildee. I'm married, and I'm the proud father of 2 lovely daughters. I'm the owner of Bob Kildee Clothing, who was actually started a retail clothing business in our city in 1954, and Camarillo was a pretty small town back in those days. Service has always been my family's motto. We've been public servants for many, many decades. I have the ability to navigate complex issues and reach consensus. However, my work is not done. We're in the midst of an expansion of St. John's Hospital. We're building new projects on Ventura Boulevard. We're actually upgrading our streets and infrastructure. I apologize for the inconvenience for everybody that drives a car, but it's like sausage. It's a little messy, but once it gets finished, it's going to be really, really good. Our city has a AAA credit rating, which is one of the few cities in the state of California that has that. I believe in continuing our funding for our public safety so we can remain one of the safest towns, not only in the county and the state, but also in the country. I look forward to answering all of your questions, and I work for you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Jameson Lingle.
Thank you. My name is Jameson Lingle. I'm running for City Council because I want to help make this the best Camarillo for everyone. To make this the best Camarillo, we need to work to reduce our traffic congestion, secure our water future, and protect open space. As a professional policy educator and advocate, I have effectively worked to influence policy that has benefited seniors, people with disabilities, the environment, and now I'd like to help work on policy that can benefit you. I'm particularly proud to be the only candidate who's been endorsed by the leaders of SOAR because I'm the only candidate who's been actively involved in fighting urban sprawl. In fact, I'm spending a significant portion of the money from my own campaign to educate voters on the difference between the real SOAR measures and the measure designed to get rid of SOAR. Along with my wife, Suzanne, a local nurse at both Pleasant Valley and St. John's Hospital, we're raising a 2-year-old daughter with another one on the way. I'm proud to say that I've been endorsed by Supervisor Kathy Long, Merrill Berge, the Camarillo representative for SOAR, Luis Roberts, president of Save Conejo Creek, as well as a number of other folks. To me, this election is about saving our open space more than anything else. We have to be careful to only approve smart growth, and we can't do smart growth when the future of our traffic congestion and our water security is so uncertain. So I'm asking you to vote yes on Measure C, yes on Measure J, no on Measure F, and yes on Jameson Lingle for City Council, and let's save Conejo Creek together.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Matt Lorimer.
Good evening. My name is Matt Lorimer. I've lived in this community for 20 years. The reason I'm running is I care and I put the needs of the citizens first. As you know, I've attended city council meetings for over 8 years. I have a passion for it, I care about it, and the main reason I'm running because we're here to solve issues. Tonight, you're going to ask yourself a very important question. Are we better off than we were 4 years ago? Well, let's look at a couple issues here. Crime. Crime is up 18%. Assaults are up 33%. That is unacceptable. When we spend 47% of our budget and $16 million, that's not acceptable. Number two, congestion on the 101 freeway. That is unacceptable. When you drive and you go to work and you come home and you have to spend an hour and 15 minutes or longer on the freeway and you want to get home to your family, that's unacceptable. SOAR. I'm 100% in favor of SOAR. I'm in favor of Measure J and C. And since we're talking about SOAR, I was the only candidate that spoke up in this forum when it came up to the Conejo Creek project. I was the only person. And remind yourselves that when you talk about these issues. Tonight, you have many choices. This is going to be the most expensive election you've seen. It's not about how many flyers in the mail. It's not about how many endorsements. The only endorsement I need is the people of Camarillo. I'm here because I care and I want to make a difference in this community. And tonight, we'll talk about those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll wrap up with Bill Little.
Good evening. I'm Bill Little. I'm completing my first term on the Camarillo City Council and running for re-election. As many of you will remember, I served you as city manager for 11 years during the time when City Camarillo was struggling to get back on its feet financially after some devastating financial investments. Today, unlike many other cities, Camarillo is physically sound. Much of this is due to the planning and studies which we undertook to track projects such as the Camarillo Premium Outlets and the Target Center, which generates substantial tax revenues. We also established an investment committee to oversee city finances, and while I was city manager, the city was awarded a AAA bond rating, which Councilman Kildee alluded to. We still have that today. We are fortunate to have many wonderful nonprofit organizations serving our community, and I've been involved with a few of them. I've served on the board of directors and as the president of the Camarillo Boys and Girls Club, the Camarillo Ranch Foundation, the Friends of the Camarillo Library, and the St. John's Pleasant Valley Hospital Board. I was also on the committees to plan the new high school, Rancho Campana. I have lived in Camarillo for 28 years. I've been involved either in city government or helping the community organizations the entire time. My achievements are a public record, which I'm very proud. I intend to continue that record to the end of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll begin the next question with you, Matt. We're going to start with you. Matt, the question is about public safety and contracting out. Currently, the city of Camarillo contracts out police services to the sheriff's department. The author of this question says, I think this decision is due for a review. I'd like to know where each candidate stands on the policy of having the sheriff's department provide police rather than the city having its own police force. This person mentions that they've experienced bureaucratic nightmares with the sheriff's department for non-emergency situations. Matt, where do you stand on having the police department continue to contract with the sheriff's department?
I think that's good, but the most important issue we probably need to ask tonight is, when you get your ballot in the mail, that's my #1 priority. I have priorities, so take a look at the ballot. You know, I was here March 22 in that auditorium, and that's the police report. When I got here, the police department read the report, and again, crime was up 18%, assaults were up 33%. You know what the mayor said here, Mr. Morgan? He said it's not as bad as it appears. If one person commits 4 crimes, it's not as bad as it appears. Then the city manager said, well, it's just another normal cycle. Ask the Park District, $10,000 in damage. Ask the school district, $25,000 in damage. Ask, I can't remember the other one, but the bottom line is I have the only solution. We need a police substation, a bicycle patrol, and we need monthly meetings with the police chief. That's a solution that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony, same question to you about public safety. Would you continue to contract with the sheriff's department or create your own police force?
Yes, I would continue to favor contracting with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department. I think they are doing a terrific job in Camarillo. Fiscally, I am not in favor of the city of Camarillo having its own city police department with the additional burdens and the fiscal constraints that that represents. We have issues currently because of Prop 47 and the impacts that that has had relative to release of offenders. And so we have an uptick, moderate uptick in crime in certain categories. And what I would like to do, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected to the City Council, is explore with the council, manager, and the police chief ways to try to address those. One way is to bring in explore bringing in a couple of additional support sworn personnel and apply them in specific issue areas that the Sheriff's Department would provide to us. So that's the answer to the question.
Thank you. Bill, same question to you. Do you support continuing to contract out with the Sheriff's Department?
Yeah, I've had a lot of experience with dealing with police departments throughout my career, and I will tell you that the Ventura County Sheriff's Department is one of the most professional, well-trained departments that I've had the pleasure to be involved with. They do a great job. Now, the idea that we can stop crime from occurring simply because we have more police officers doesn't. You just have to look and read the headlines every day about how much crime is it's increasing across the country. It doesn't matter where you are. And we have our share of it. Prop 47, as was mentioned, has turned some people back on the street that probably shouldn't have been, and they continue to work their way. I support going ahead and keeping our Sheriff's Department well-funded, well-equipped, and we are also, one other additional idea is that we will be funding another patrol unit on the west side of the city in the next budget year.
Stop you there. Okay, Kevin, you're up next. What's your position about the Sheriff's Department?
I totally support the current sheriff with the county. They do a tremendous job. I have a retail business, and I have had several calls of service for them. They've been always professional, on time, and they do their business to the utmost benefit to all Camarillo residents. I have very few complaints about the police situation in Camarillo. We've had tremendous commanders here. All of them are some of the best and the brightest that they have to offer here. It's way less money than if we had our own. The politics stays out of it, which is really good. And they're tremendously highly trained. For instance, the body cameras, they waited until other departments implemented them, and they did their research, thoroughly researched, and got the best deal for their money. They're very professional. We looked at this when I first was elected here 20 years ago, and we decided to stay with Ventura County Sheriff's Department, and we're lucky that we did.
Thank you. Jameson, we'll wrap up with you.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page. The Ventura County Sheriff's Department, from my experience, is accessible and proactive. He's talking about the cameras. They did that before they actually had problems here in Ventura County. So I think that foresight really says a lot about Sheriff Dean, and Camarillo Chief of Police Monica McGrath has been extremely accessible and easy to talk to. So I'm sorry that someone had a bad experience. What I would say is that I absolutely support the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, but if I was your councilman, I hope that you would be able to come talk with me, and if I could act as a conduit between you and the Sheriff's Department, I would be happy to do that.
Thank you. Next question, we're going to start with Kevin Kildee. Kevin, let's talk about seniors. Would you agree or disagree that the Camarillo City Council should have a policy to build a first-class community senior center, similar to the ones in Simi Valley or Thousand Oaks? So tell us about your position on a senior center, and with the rest of the time, you could tell us about your views on seniors.
Well, we're working towards that at this particular point. The Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District is in the midst of getting a plan together for this. We've had some very preliminary discussions with this. We're very fortunate in Camarillo that we have the healthcare district, we have Leisure Village, and those have a lot of public outreach for our seniors here. As most of us know here, that the senior population is growing here. I'm getting closer and closer to that age. Proud to say I'm 60, and we'll continue to work for that. I hope that someday that we can do it, but we need to plan it. We need to make sure that the programs are not duplicated. We have to make sure that everybody has a say in this. Once you build a senior citizen center, it's here for a long, long time. So we want to make sure that when we do get one, that it's going to be state-of-the-art, and I'm very, very confident at some point that we will have one.
Thank you. Jameson, you're up next on the question about the senior center.
Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely believe that we should support a senior center. Not only that, Camarillo is the only city in Ventura County that does not support our local senior center. So that is critical. The other thing that I think is really important, and I haven't heard anyone else talk about, but when I was calling for SOAR, telling people to show up at the library to sign our signatures, is I talked to an 85-year-old Korean War veteran who's blind, and he goes to the VA in Oxnard for his medical appointments. So when he goes from Camarillo to Oxnard for his medical appointments, this gentleman gets dropped off at the edge of Camarillo. He has to wait for an hour window to be picked up and taken to the VA. So if I'm on the city council, I'm going to push to make sure that seniors and people with disabilities can get to their medical appointments in Ventura and Thousand Oaks without being transferred and dropped off on the edge of city. So I've worked for over 10 years in policy advocacy. Most of that has been for seniors and people with disabilities. I've worked with the Ventura area of aging and the Ventura County Transportation Agencies on these issues for seniors.
Thank you. Tony, same question to you. Do you support a first-class community center, and view on seniors?
Yes, I do support a first-class senior center, and the way to fund it is either is through city funds or what I've been advocating, which is to have the city council consider taking a slice of the transient occupancy tax that the city collects each and every year. This last year was $2.3 million, and dedicate a slice of that TOT for the Recreation and Park District. But I want to reshape the conversation just slightly. It's my view that this city council has been too passive and has not engaged collaboratively with the other public agencies in Camarillo, including the Recreation and Park District. I don't want this city council to sit back. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I want this city council to affirmatively collaborate on a needs assessment, on the need for a senior center and other senior issues with the Recreation and Park District. I think we have every reason to expect as citizens that our council exercises leadership, steps forward, and affirmatively works with other agencies, including Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District, rather than waits for issues to come up.
Thank you. Bill, same question to you, Bill, as far as the first-class senior center.
About 3 years ago, at my insistence, the city council sat down with the board of the Park and Rec Commission, and we discussed issues. Certainly among those were the recreation center, and at that time, the city said, we will be willing to contribute to that when you have a plan of action, some plans as to what you want to build, how much it's going to cost, and what you think we should be involved with. They are now getting themselves organized to do that very thing, which is to develop a plan of action. And so we've been waiting for 3 years for that to happen. The housing, the senior citizen problem is more than just this recreation. We've got 20%, our 65 and older population is approaching 20% of the population. We need to take that into account when we talk about housing and other issues.
Thank you, Bill. And Matt, we'll wrap up the question about a first-class community center with you.
You know, I know about this issue because I've been attending city council meetings and I've been attending park district meetings. It's disgraceful. Every city gives about $250,000 to build a senior center. okay? For our seniors, 69,000 people live in the city of Camarillo. 30% are seniors. That's about 20,000. I've been there. When there was a meeting here 2 years ago, let me just be frank with you. Dan Lovato was here. He said to Bruce Thing, hey, I want to schedule meetings because Mary's coming on board. And he said, you can't walk and chew gum. That's how they treat the seniors. How many times, you notice they never said here, how many times they go visit their senior center. It's disgraceful. You know something? You paid taxes for years. I've been fighting this. It's unacceptable. You know something? When a woman goes to use a restroom in a wheelchair, she can barely make it in there. That's disgraceful. You know something? They can build a senior center. It needs to happen. But you know something? They need to start relationships. They can't keep waiting. It needs to happen. So it's the number one. It's one of my major priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to begin the next question with Bill, and we're going to talk about city reserves. And what are your plans for this? And I believe the city reserves are like 14 million or 20 million, perhaps you know, Bill. But what are your views about the city's reserves and how they should be used?
The city has, for many years, had a policy of funding reserves at 100% or more of its required amount in any one fund. For example, the general fund has a 100% funding policy. We now have a general fund funded at with reserves of about 150%. So there's a lot of money out there that is sitting in funds that I think should be evaluated and determined to be used for other purposes. If we need a consultant to come in, look at the funds, and decide what is a prudent level. I certainly believe that every fund needs to be funded at least 100% of its necessary value, but some of these funds are 200% or more.
Thank you. Matt, what are your position about the city's reserves? What's your plan?
Well, when we talk reserves, let's go look at the firehouse. It's been sitting there for 20 years. Okay, you want to talk about money? They bought it for $150,000. Then they bought the park next to it for $1 million. 20 years we've been waiting for the city council because they wanted to open a restaurant. Then they put it on the market for 6 months. They put a sign on it that says, we want it for a restaurant. Then they took it off. Then we've been 3 months, basically, negotiations to sell the thing. And you wonder why things don't get done. You know, you talk about money. You know something, we just talked about a senior center. Why don't we do the first thing we need to take care of? The seniors need a new senior center. I think it's going to cost between $5 and $8 million. I was saying that it's important that we take care of the things in this community, but you know something, let's go back to that issue. That issue is a priority. The senior center is probably the most needed thing that's needed in this community. So let's start with that. They have plenty of reserves. That's the major issue, I think.
Thank you. Kevin, what is your position on the reserves? What's your plan?
One of the things I'm most proud of, what a concept. We actually have a city that have reserves here. Unheard of in our county and certainly unheard of in a lot of cities in our state here. Yes, we do have 100% reserve policy here, but we also have a very aggressive capital improvement projects. And if you look at what we're doing with our infrastructure and our streets now, go around the county and see if any other city is doing anything close to what we're doing. And just wait until you see some of the capital projects that we have budgeted here. We're always willing to look this. I have to remind everybody that a lot of these funds are encumbered. That means that the money's there. We're not going to spend them every year, but we can roll them over to the next year for other expenditures and other ideas and other projects that may come to our fruition here and that we might want to fund. And we've got the money to do it. And ladies and gentlemen, that is very rare in this business.
Thank you. Jameson, what is your position on the city's reserves, your plans?
I think a lot of people have complaints about Camarillo in different aspects, but our reserves is really one of the best things that we have going for us, and I think the city has done a good job with that. I think we need to use some of that money to invest in things like the senior center. I think we need to improve our transit. I think we need to invest in Old Town, and I certainly will be really aggressive in trying to improve our city in a lot of ways, but my number one priority among those things will be making sure that we maintain our reserves, and I'll work to defend that.
Thank you. Tony, we'll wrap up with you on the reserves.
Well, we have very healthy city reserves. As of June 30 of 2015, under the city's comprehensive annual financial report, the reserves totaled about $175 million. $115 million of that was in LAIF and about $62 million in government securities. I give great credit to the city for doing that and for being fiscally responsible. The city has a revenue debt only of about $25.6 million and has no general obligation debt. So we're in relatively good shape financially. I have two specific areas of focus, though, if I'm lucky enough to be on the council. The first is the continuing transfer of general fund monies, transfers from the general fund to various operating funds for the city, including the Lighting, Landscaping, Maintenance Fund. I have long-term sustainability questions about that practice. And last year, those transfers were about $7.5 million. Secondly, our pension liability. Our annual pension expense is about $1.76 million. I'd like to look at that and examine that and see whether we can bring that down somewhat.
Thank you. I was way off when I was guessing 20 million, wasn't I? Wow. All right, Jameson, we'll start with you on transportation tax. So there's Measure AA, which is to pass a half-cent sales tax to fund transportation in Ventura County. So the question is, do you support Measure AA? And if you do, why is it justified for 20% to go to the 101 and 50% to the cities? And also, whether you support it or not, what do you think should happen with the money that comes into the city?
Sure. Traffic congestion is so important because not only does it affect the quality of life for people that live here, but the EDC says that Camarillo and Ventura County's economic future, the number one economic threat to our future is traffic congestion in Camarillo and Ventura County. So personally, what I think needs to happen with that money, and I think is part of the plan, is we need to widen the bridges over the freeway. There's two places where it creates a massive pinch. We need an auxiliary lane so that people that live in the city can get on and off of the freeway really quickly. I live on Arneal. I live off of Arneal. Sometimes I go to Target. I get on the freeway. And I'm like, why didn't I take daily to get there? And I'm just sitting on the freeway. So I do support AA because that is the only plan that will widen the bridges, that will create an auxiliary lane, and that's why I support it. In terms of why, well, I'm going to stop there.
Okay, thank you. Bill, same question to you. Do you support Measure AA on the transportation? You feel it's justified, and how would you use the money?
Well, I represent the city on the Ventura County Transportation Commission, and we had a number of study sessions on this, and I've come to the conclusion there's just nothing alternative. There's no alternative that we can rely on to get us to where we should be. As has been said, the highway is not only just taking traffic, but it also is carrying the commerce of this area, is through this area and around it. And we need that free flow of traffic as much as possible. The city, one of the reasons why the city is, or the breakdown of the money is as it is that $600 million is set aside for the freeways of improving the 118 and the 101. Now, people say, well, that's not enough money. Obviously, it's not. But you got to remember, that's the local share. And the federal government will add about at least double that for that.
Thank you, Bill. Matt, same question to you. Do you support Measure AA? How do you think the funds should be used?
Well, you just heard Kevin said they're redoing your streets. I cannot support Measure AA.
Actually, Matt, I don't think Kevin has answered this question yet.
Sorry.
So but I'll ask Roger to go ahead and reset the time. We'll let you start over. And so the question is, do you support Measure AA? And how do you think that the money should be spent if it passes?
No, I do not measure AA, and here's the reason why. You heard before Kevin said the streets are getting done. Measure AA, let's go with the facts. It's only 20% for the freeway, 50% for the city. It's a 30-year tax. Now, when you look on their site, Ventura County Transportation Committee, on there they said they're going to improve sound walls and flood runoff from water. You know, this is a tax for 30 years. And if you look at this tax, any given time, this committee, 2/3 of it can basically let the public know in 45 days and raise it. There is no need to add a tax like this. Only 20% in the freeway. What do you think you could do with 20%? It's like if I gave you $1 and I said you can only spend 20%, I mean, where could you spend that? I mean, the point is, if Howard Jarvis was alive, he would be upset. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. It'd be different if it was 80% for 5 years. Then we'd be talking about something different. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Tony.
Two aspects to this question. First of all, I do support Measure AA. I think it is the only, first of all, I'm fiscally conservative. I don't like sales tax or other tax increases, but it is the only responsible means right now in 2016 to address the issues of the 101 mess. What Measure AA will do is create both direct dollars in sales tax revenue as well as additional leveraged dollars to go toward planning and implementing improvements that we desperately need on 101. Anyone who was caught on 101 during the day, and myself isn't, I'm included in that, I would hope could stipulate that it is a very inefficient way to move people, goods, and services. In fact, it's not moving people or goods or services during the Camarillo crawl. We need those funds. It's not responsible to wait until the next election cycle. I would have liked to cut a different deal, but we're past that, and we need to act, and we need to act now as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, we'll wrap up with you on this question. As far as Measure AA, if it passes, where would you spend the money?
Ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, this is our only hope to try to get our traffic at least marginally improved. I collect sales tax. I know how burdensome that can be, but remember, it's 7.5%. It's going to go up to 8%. The average Ventura County resident that drives spends 23 hours per year stuck on the 101. We have to do better than that. It's a locally tax that's going to stay locally. We're very fortunate here in the city of Camarillo. We have the revenue to at least keep up pretty well on our streets, but many, many other cities in the county don't. It's going to be a real boon to them. We need to work very hard on this. It's going to cost the average taxpayer between about $30 to $50 a year. To me, that's a very small price to pay for a relatively large benefit. It does sunset after 30 years, and please, please, whatever you can do, please go out and talk about the benefits of this.
Thank you. We're going to begin our next question with Tony, and let's talk about housing. A little bit of background. There's about $600,000 in accumulated block grant money sitting in the city of Camarillo, according to the questioner. And the question is, where do you stand on low-income housing in the city? Do you think that there is enough allowed? And also, what is your views on those for the disabled? Is there enough housing needs for the disabled?
Try and cover this in 60 seconds. First of all, with the way open space protection laws are, it's critically important that we as a city look to our urban core and provide infill development within our urban core. That's the way things are going to go in the future. That's what we need to focus on now. And by infill, I mean mixed-use development and looking at parcels that may not have been efficiently used or have been previously identified for redevelopment. We no longer have a redevelopment agency. We no longer have tax increment financing to utilize. However, we do have some incentives, I believe, that I would pursue to try to provide additional housing. That additional housing should include both multifamily as well as low and affordable income housing. There, as you all know, there is a state percentage that is required for providing affordable housing, state requirements, and I believe the city is currently, well, actually, we'll have some comment about whether this city is currently meeting those percentages. But where to look is in our core for that mixed-use development.
Thank you. Kevin, same question to you about low-income housing and housing for special needs.
Well, it's interesting that $600,000 block grant keeps going down every year. There's a big need for low-income and houses for seniors here. Our housing policy in Camarillo, we've really tried so hard for many, many years here to get to 15 to 20% affordables in any new projects. And I defy anybody to drive around the city and look at our affordable housing and see if there's any difference between the housing that's built in that neighborhood and the affordable housing. We sprinkle them around our city, and we make sure that they look exactly the same as any other house in that neighborhood. And that doesn't come easily. We work very, very hard for that. As far as with special needs, the Elacore, there will be some units that are being constructed in the near future that will be able to accommodate some of that. That's been something that this council has been very, very progressive on. We work extremely hard on this. There's a big demand for single-story houses, and we're working very hard to accommodate that.
Thank you, Kevin. Same question to you, Jameson. Do you need me to repeat it?
No, thank you. Currently, the city of Camarillo has over 2,000 houses in the pipeline being built. I support smart growth, but I think it's really hard to have smart growth when there's so much uncertainty regarding the future of our traffic congestion and our water security. So when I'm on the city council, I will work to slow growth until we have the infrastructure, the ability to support the infrastructure that we have. With that being said, if we do have growth, I think it does need to have an affordability component, and working with people with disabilities, I do know that we do not have enough housing that is accessible as well. But I think we need to be really, really careful about the future growth that we do. They say we're going to be done growing in Camarillo within the next 6 years. So if we do grow, we need to make sure that that benefits the quality of life for people in Camarillo over profit.
Thank you. Same question to you, Matt. Do you need me to repeat it?
You know, I know about special needs. My son has autism, and there's people that played soccer down there in the fields, and a lot of parents wonder where their kids are going to be staying. And, you know, they go on Section 8 vouchers. It can take up to a year to 2 years to get a place. I know Many Mansions is working on some projects out here. But, you know, here's the bottom line. You know, again, this is your city council. They're supposed to advocate for people. What have they been doing for the last 4 years? They haven't been advocating for their seniors. Now they haven't been advocating for people who have disabilities. You know, again, when you have a city council, it's more than just showing up here and having the staff do the research. You should open your mouth. If you want to see a system that works good, go to the Park Service. You know, I go over there, and I'm going to tell you something. The members on the board, they're always looking for solutions, and they take solutions from people in the audience. The city needs to do more than just talk about it. They need to move forward on it. So this is something that needs to be brought up at meetings and actually done. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bill, we'll wrap up with you on this one.
Well, for about the last 20 years, the city has required development to provide 15 to 20% of its housing that is planned to be set aside for low and moderate income. Very low, low, and moderate. And that has been done on all projects in about the last 20 years. As a result, we've created about 1,500 houses that are now being, below market rents, below market values. And we have worked with them. We've worked at second mortgages for providing second mortgages for on houses or condominiums. So I think we've done a pretty good job. We've also cooperated fully with the Housing Authority of Ventura County to provide help to them in their conversion of houses or apartments to housing. So we've done a lot.
Thank you, Bill. And we're going to start with Kevin on this next question. I'm sorry, no, we're starting with Matt. Matt, there's several ballot measures that people are interested in, Measure C, Measure F, and Measure J. Will you please share with us where you stand on each of these? We heard about Measure C and F last forum. That was on the countywide SOAR, and I believe J is on the Camarillo City SOAR. So tell us where you stand on each of those, and you could tell us why. Matt, you're up first.
On Measure J, I'm for it. Basically, it's for the city. For C, it's for the county, I'm for it. And Measure F, I'm against it. Again, let's talk about who was here 8 years ago. There's a lot of people running here, and the council's here. But you know something? I've been going for 8 years, and you know who was here in this room? I was. I was the only one here. I was against the Conejo Creek project. And you know, the city attorney wrote all the candidates and said, oh no, you can't talk about it. You got to be good, or there'll be a problem. But you know something? I've been an advocate. And you know something? That was a horrible project. And you know what happened? The residents had to come here. And you know, the city council votes on development all the time. But they said, if you vote for that, we're going to throw you out of office. But you know what that is? This is another point where they don't listen to the people in this community. You know, the only time things happen, it seems like, in this world or in your community is when you get angry and you come down here. But you know something? The people of Camarillo do not want more development. They don't want the San Fernando Valley in their backyard. Thank you.
Thank you. And up next, we're going to go to Tony on this. Measure C, Measure F, Measure J.
I support Measure J. I support Measure C. I do not support Measure F. The reason I do not support Measure F principally is because the scope and the impact of the school sites exemption, to me, after reviewing the initiatives, are unclear, and that's with respect to the amount of acreage involved. I believe that's it in a nutshell, and my position is very clear on it. I'd like to go back just for a minute because I neglected to answer a question with respect to affordable housing. I do fully support looking at and collaborative efforts with the area agency on housing and many mansions on supporting additional housing for young disabled adults and for disabled adults.
Thank you. Bill, let's hear from you as far as Measure C, Measure F, and J.
I support Measure J because it could keep the urban boundary line, which is what we have agreed to in 1998 with the first SOAR. It allows the city to develop within its boundaries and protects the farmlands around it. I also I support Sustain VC Measure F because I believe that I'm looking at it and I think it more fits what the farmers are been talking about to handle their requirements under the SOAR. It's a SOAR initiative. It just has a couple of different changes in the various components of that and what is required. I just think that if the farmers put it together, I think it's probably more flexible for their agricultural sustainability.
Thank you. Jameson, same question to you on C, F, and J.
I 100% support C and J, as I said in my introduction, and I'll say it again in my closing. But for me, it's more than just lip service because I actually helped with the strategy to get Measure J on the ballot the second time. The kickoff party was at my house. I knocked on doors. I phone banked. I was at the library and the farmers market collecting signatures. And I think that's really interesting. Just the other day, Bill Little was saying that he supports SOAR, and if you look at his Facebook page, everything is #SOAR. But at the last debate, I pointed out that when he came on the Ventura County podcast, he listed a whole bunch of reasons why he actually doesn't support SOAR. So I'm glad to see that he's saying that he actually doesn't support SOAR tonight. But with that being said, I do support SOAR. I'm going to support it in the future. I'm going to work to make sure that it remains in Ventura County. And I'm also spending a significant portion of my own campaign money to make sure that voters know the difference between C, J, and F.
Thank you. Kevin, we'll wrap up with you on C, J, and F.
I support Measure C and I support Measure J. I don't support Measure F particularly. I think that the voters had to decide one of them. I think that whoever gets the most votes is the one that's going to pass. I have to tell you, from a personal perspective as a current council member, the SOAR Measure C has made me a better urban planner. And I think if you look at the way that our city has been laid out with our 25-year circulation plan here and the type of development that we have allowed here that has been of the highest quality, we've listened to the residents, we've listened to the builders. We've taken into consideration market conditions here, and I think every project that we have built in Camarillo has been worthwhile, and it's held its value unless there's a downturn in the economy. I know one of the best investments I ever made was buying a house in Camarillo.
Thank you. Kevin, we're going to go ahead and stay with you, and let's go a little higher level. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. But this question specifically is, looking out over the next 5 years, candidates, what is the most critical single issue that you think the council will face, and how will you deal with that? Kevin?
Well, I think one of the most critical issues is going to be water and a reliable and sustainable program for water. We're actually in a very tremendous and a very gruesome drought here, as many of us know that have lived in Southern California, that We all know drought conditions very well, but I have to say what the city has done is that we kept our tiered water rates in effect even when we didn't have the drought, and that actually allowed us, when the state came down with a at least 20% mandate to cut back our water, many other cities had to cut back 30, and in some cases 40%. Because of our tiered rates, we had to cut back 20% here. We're looking for new sources. We're a little bit bogged down in a regulatory process of a desalter here, but we also have a low-flow toilet program and drought-resistant plants.
Thank you. And next up is Jameson.
This is really easy for me because I say it like 100 times a day. We need to work to reduce our traffic congestion, secure our water future, and protect open space. To reduce our traffic congestion, we need to widen the bridges, and we need an auxiliary lane, and I think AA is the best way to do that. We also need to improve our public transportation. We need a unified public transportation system because right now it takes so much time to get from one part of this county to the other. To secure our water future, we need to get this desalter passed, but also we need a net zero water policy. Recently, the city of Ventura moved to a net zero water policy. They're in a lot more difficult strains than we are, but we're going to get there at some point. And so if something is built, we need to make sure that it is built to reduce the water usage, and if there's no water source, developers have to pay for it. To protect our open space, that's really simple. We need to stop building on our open space.
Thank you. Tony, same question to you. Looking out 5 years, what do you think is the most critical single issue?
Since mid-July, I've walked several thousand homes literally in this city, and we also conducted a survey on our Facebook council campaign page. And the results that we've received back are consistent, both as in terms of receiving input from walking and also over Facebook. That is, number one is growth and development, and number two is trust and transparency in the council. Those are the issues that are most important to the voters. I think in the next 5 years, particularly with respect to growth and development, we need to start looking very seriously at, we know that we are not going to be able to build outside our footprint, so we need to look inside, and we need to look from an economic vitality standpoint on what we are doing relative to affording economic vitality within the city core, mixed-use development. We have to balance that, and life is a balance, folks, between that and traffic and water. We need water, continue the water conservation. I'm a proponent of the Pleasant Valley Desalter Project, and those, I believe, are the most important things in the next 5 years.
Thank you. Bill, same question to you. What do you think is the most critical issue in the next 5 years?
Well, most of the things that I would have said have already been spoken about, but I would agree that if the Measure AA fails, transportation and the mobility of getting around this county is going to be, in my opinion, probably the one most everyday problem that people will have. Water is going to certainly be an issue, although I constantly, as an optimist, hope for rain, and someday we may have it. And then thirdly is growth. That is something we're going to be shifting from large track areas of growth to building in sustainable ways around the core of the city, maybe resurrect the Village Commons project in Camarillo where Ponderosa Shopping Center is.
Thank you. And Bill, we're going to start with you. I'm sorry. Yes, Bill, we will start with you. Matt, did I call you? I don't think I did, Matt.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
You left me behind. It's okay.
I didn't leave you behind. I was just showing my age.
That's
Matt, go ahead and give us your top priority over the next 5 years.
You know, there's 3 issues here, folks. 13, 14, and 50, crime is up. This year, 18 to 33% crime. And what they said, yeah, it's Proposition 47, so they have no solution. I have a solution. You need a bike patrol, you need a police substation, and you need to have monthly meetings. 2, have you noticed in Old Town and around here you have vacant buildings? They have no marketing plan because basically people are using their smartphones and they haven't come up with a marketing plan. We need a marketing plan basically for what we're going to do with those areas. Number 3, traffic. Measure AA does nothing. It only provides 20%. It's the most ridiculous measure that's ever been put forth. You know what they don't talk about? VCTC is responsible for rideshare. You know how many times they promoted it? October 3rd to the 6th, basically. Rideshare is going to be very important, and also if we have businesses we can talk to work 4 days a week, it would help. You know, freight arrives at night. It doesn't arrive in the daytime, so let's be serious there. But we need to promote more rideshare. Thank you.
Okay, Bill, we're going to start with you, but before that, there was a question from the audience on the transportation tax. I guess I said it was a 0.5% tax. It's a 0.5 cent, but it's always described usually on $1, so it does represent 0.5% of every dollar that you spend is the amount of the sales tax. So it's adding that. I'm looking at these guys, see if I got that right. Okay, I'll say yes. That was the question to me. That's why I don't answer questions. Okay, let's move on. Candidates, want to try and squeeze in 2 here. If you can do this in a minute, this will be our last question. Number 1, where do you stand on term limits for the City Council? And number 2, for challengers and for incumbents, do you have any occupations or other interests that would require you to recuse yourself because of potential conflicts of interest? And we're going to start this one with you, Bill.
As far as term limits are concerned, I have basically supported term limits at the legislature, and I would support, if the voters approved it, I would support term limits for our council. There is some drawbacks, obviously. I think you need to have an adequate, what is a term limit, and that would probably be, in my opinion, 12 years would be an adequate time to serve. And I would support that as a time to go with 12 years as the limits.
Do you have any outside interests that would disqualify you from any votes?
As I said in my opening statement, my full life has been engaged in the public process, in government, and in private, helping out nonprofits. And that's, so I have no interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Jameson, what is your position on term limits, and do you have any outside interests that would disqualify you or potential conflicts of interest?
Unless they try to do something right there on Dunnigan, I don't think I have any conflicts of interest. With regard to term limits, I'm admittedly agnostic on term limits. Sometimes I think they do good work, sometimes I don't think they do good work. But here is my main concern about term limits is that if we see turnover in Camarillo, we haven't in a long time, obviously, but Camarillo has absolutely no limit on campaign finance. If a developer wanted to give a candidate $100,000 to run for city council, they could absolutely do that. So my fear is if there is more turnover, then special interests, and particularly developers, are going to start buying off city council members and spending enough money to make sure that they get the people they want on the city council. So what I think needs to happen is campaign finance reform if we have term limits, and I'm going to push for it even if we don't have term limits. And I'm concerned that it could even be happening this election cycle.
Thank you. Tony, same question to you. What's your position on term limits, and in your occupation, has there been any situations that would be potential conflicts of interest?
As to the first question, I support term limits. I've called for a term limit of 12 years, 3 terms maximum. For myself personally, I would intend, if I'm lucky enough to be elected to the council, only go for 8 years and 2 terms. That's a personal decision of mine, and that's what I've been advocating. And by the way, when I speak in favor of term limits, I'm not, there's absolutely no disrespect to the incumbents on the council. I thank them for their service. They're well-intentioned people. I do note that if you aggregate the total number of years that this current city council has been sitting, the 5 of them, it's 108 years and 27 terms plus 11 years as a city manager. With respect to occupation, I am General Counsel for Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District. I would intend to step away from that representation if I'm lucky enough to be elected to the council. I'm not aware of any other conflicts that would disqualify me from voting on any city issues, but of course if that happened, I would recuse myself, and I am very familiar with conflict of interest laws because I advise clients on it all the time.
Thank you. Matt, same question to you. Where do you stand on term limits, and would you have any conflicts of interest?
I support term limits, and let's be honest why this question was asked. You know why this question is asked tonight. Take a look on Ventura Boulevard and look at a firehouse that's been sitting vacant for 20 years. The people have been in office here, they have excuse. Why is it we don't have a senior center for 12 years? Okay? Ask yourself a question. When we had the Fiesta scandal, you know they have a fraud policy? They never followed it. You know, since that Fiesta scandal, this city council not once has had any kind of reforms to add on their thing. city council members should not sit on nonprofits. You know, I could talk about Habitat for Humanity. They signed a contract, they didn't have a license, they didn't do permits. I could talk about the Planning Commission. Do you know they appoint people on the Planning Commission? You want to stop your developers, you know, they can basically choose the people they want on the Planning Commission. So, you know, you're asking that question because you're tired of what you see here at City Council. They don't get things done. We've been talking about this for years. It's time to have term limits. Thank you.
And Kevin, we'll wrap up with you on this question about term limits and any conflicts of interest, presumably from your business.
We have term limits in place. It's called an election. We have an election every 2 years. I run every 4 years. Ladies and gentlemen, look up here tonight. I have been challenged every time that I have ran for the city of Camarillo. I run my campaign on a limited budget. So does every other council member that has ever been elected or even run in this city up to this point here. We run citywide. We do not run in neighborhoods. Everybody has a chance to reflect on the job that I do every 4 years, and I do not take that for granted. The current council members and all the previous council members work very, very hard for the benefit of one thing, and that's the betterment of our city here. The only conflict that I've ever had that I'm aware of, and I work very hard not to have a conflict, is that when the city did decide to fund the trolley, I have a business within 300 feet of it, and I was not able to vote on it.
Thank you. That concludes our time for questions. We're going to start closing statements in a moment. But candidates, there's quite a few questions I couldn't get to. I'll just share with you what's on the voters' minds. There was a question asking about which of the incumbents voted on the Springville development and wondering how the challengers would have voted. There was a question about cannabis, regardless of whether Prop 64 passes. The question is, would the candidates actually vote in favor of banning the medical marijuana use and the businesses that would provide that in the community? Other questions about partnering with the Pleasant Valley Rec and Park District on better facilities. Are you familiar with any voter fraud in the city or county? And there was a feeling that candidates didn't really answer the question about using the transportation tax funds, and one more about redevelopment. So I apologize not having enough time to get all your questions in, but they were all excellent. At this time, we're going to begin closing statements. It's 1 minute. We're going to reverse the order. We'll start with Bill Little.
Thank you. We live in a city that is ranked 23rd best city to live in the United States. And we also live in the city that's ranked 6th best to live in California. Think of what we have. In addition to the best climate in the world, we have a city that is financially strong. We have a safe city because of well-trained and well-equipped police department, contrary to one of the candidates. Our city is beautiful. Our streets are well-maintained, and city services are responsive to our needs. In addition, we have a world-class library that provides programs for everyone and outstanding schools, including our state-of-the-art new high school. All this just didn't happen. It takes planning, foresight, and hard work. Some of the issues I've been working on in the coming 4 years include the drought and its impacts, traffic congestion, increased economic.
I have to stop you there, Bill.
Thank you.
Our next candidate is Matthew Lorimer.
Tonight, you've heard a lot of different issues, but it's the same issues, and they've gotten worse. Crime is up 18%, assaults are up 33%, your freeways are crowded. We've been talking about a senior center for 12 years, a fire station that's empty for 20 years, and people come to City Hall because I'm here, and they have complaints, and they're not basically paying attention to. Things are not working. 4 years, look at it. A Fiesta scandal, your fireworks show was a failure. Look at the people in charge. Look at what they brought you. It's not working. You know, it's not about how many fancy flyers you get in the mail. It's the campaign statements that are in this book. Take a look at them. Take a look at who understands what's going on in the city. You know, I don't need endorsements. The only endorsement I need is the people of Camarillo. Do you want change at City Hall? Then you need to vote for it. And I'm the only candidate that spent 8 years here, and I have a good idea of what we need. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Jameson Lingle.
Thank you. I want to end tonight by repeating myself that to me, this election cycle, from the measures to who we elect for county supervisor to who we elect for city council, will have a dramatic effect on the amount of development we have in the city of Camarillo in the very near future. We have to be careful to only approve smart growth, and it's really difficult to have smart growth when there's so much uncertainty regarding the future of our water security and our traffic congestion. I think it's important that we see a clear contrast between the candidates that spoke today. I think we need to question the sincerity of their positions on SOAR and development. One of the candidates up here claimed to support SOAR very recently, even though they're on the record listing all the reasons they don't support SOAR. Another candidate recently decided to support SOAR, yet they've raised thousands of dollars from developers that are building in San Fernando Valley and Ventura County. I am the only candidate who's been actively involved in the SOAR effort, so I'm asking you to vote yes on Measure C, yes on Measure J, no on Measure F, and yes on Jamison Lingle for Camarillo City Council, and let's save Conejo Creek together.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Kevin Kildee.
Yes, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve you, the residents of the city of Camarillo. I've been in a unique place here. I have known every council member that has ever served in the city of Camarillo, and they've all served with distinction, and that also is very factual of our current city council here. I have an open door policy. I'm a problem solver. I encourage people to call me or come into my store and talk about current city issues, which they do. I keep logs on that. I work for you. The only thing that I am ready and willing to do is for the betterment of our city. We are poised to do some great, great things in the city of Camarillo. Our employment is up. We've got a biotech company that's willing to move here. We've got some expansion in our business districts here. We have great hospitals, which is going to be expanded, great schools, and great parks. It's an honor and privilege to serve you, the people of Camarillo.
Thank you. And our last candidate is Tony Tremblay.
Thank you very much to the League of Women Voters and for the opportunity to participate this evening. Camarillo is a wonderful place to live, but we can do better. Why vote for me? I'm not an incumbent. I'm committed to changing the way that this city council operates. I have the qualifications to do just that. I know how local government operates, and I know how it should operate for the benefit of our citizens. As your council member, I want to do a number of things. First, create more opportunities for far better communications between the city council and residents, including town hall meetings, social media, and an advanced calendaring system. I would like the council to affirmatively exercise leadership and collaboration with other public agencies which serve city residents, and that's the Recreation and Park District, Healthcare District, Camarosa, and the county. I want to focus on the attraction and retention of business in the city, and finally, quality of life, increasing our economic vitality within the city. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Star, Supervisor Kathy Long, and other local officials. I respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got some announcements, but before that, how about a round of applause for these 5 candidates? At the League, we see this type of forum as part of our mission to provide community information about candidates, and to put on something like this takes a host of volunteers. I'd like to recognize Carol Lindberg, Pat Butler, Helen Lamont, Pam Peckerich, and Suzanne Harvey up here at the table. Pat and Roger Essick running the timer. Point out that in the back, as you leave the foyer, there's a table with membership information about the League of Women Voters. I'd also like to thank our volunteers from AAUW, B. Littlebeck and Judy Gill. And I also want to take a moment to thank the City of Camarillo. The city clerk and her office has been very helpful in putting this on. Connie's working in the back on the TV, so this will be available. And I also want to mention that this will be available on KADYTV.net if you want to go and watch this later. So from the League of Women Voters, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Good night.